Is there a direct connection between Mac Tony's Crypto-Terrestrials and the Men in Black? Nick Redfern, Mysterious Universe reports. My previous article was on the possibility that there just might be humanoids living deep under the surface of our planet and who have lived there for a very long time, maybe even for thousands of years. It sounds bizarre and even impossible, but stay with me. The one person who was on the edge of really digging deep into the subject was the late Mac Tonys. Unfortunately, Tonys has lost his life when he was just in his 30s from a heart problem. Today, I want to share something with you, namely that there might be a connection between Mac's speculative underground creatures and the Men in Black. It sounds strange, but stay with me. It says if you read Mac's book, The Crypto-Terrestrials, you'll see that many of the people who have seen the Crypto-Terrestrials describe them in a fashion that is extremely similar to the Men in Black, the Women in Black, and the Black-Eyed Children. For example, most of them mainly come out at night, and they camouflage themselves when they get out. Let's have a look at this issue and see if we can put together a coherent picture of what might be going on. Let's begin with the Men in Black, he says. I have on record a large number of reports that strongly suggest entities from elsewhere are using camouflage to move among us. We're talking, as bizarrely as it surely sounds, about creatures that don't look entirely human and who wear hats, wigs, and large sunglasses to mark their true identities, mask their identities. If there were just a few such reports, we could dismiss them as nonsense. But there are not just a few, there are dozens. And I'm talking only about the cases I have on file. Who knows how many similar reports other investigators have? Of course, references to odd-looking people wearing hats, wigs, and sunglasses, and in relation to UFOs, instantly provoke imagery of the Men in Black. The matter of the so-called black-eyed children springs to mind too. After all, the BEC are rarely seen without their black hoodies, which offer a degree of camouflage, and particularly so during nighttime encounters. But the Men in Black and the BEC are just two parts of a much bigger mystery. The issue 187 of Fortean Times magazine, writer Mark Pilkington, reviewed the Fortnite 2004 gig. He commented on some of the data revealed at the conference by the late alien abduction researcher Bud Hopkins. Quote, in order to better blend in with us humans, the Greys have taken to wearing wigs and sunglasses. The aliens are also experimenting with growing hair on the heads of their genetic hybrid Grey human creations. They're also developing pupils to get around those giveaway wrap-around black eyes, end quote. Eris Andes had her own run-in with one of these camouflaged ETs in 1988, as she described in an appropriately titled 2004 article for Fortean Times, quote, a quiet invasion, end quote. While walking down one particular street located, not stated, Andes encountered a humanoid creature with waxy gray skin, quote unquote, with no pores and no hair. It looked damp. The mouth was small, the nose tiny, and the chin pointed. And she added, the most amazing thing was a pair of glasses he wore made of some yellow reflective stuff. They wrapped around the sides of his head like some futuristic skinwear. All of the above was strikingly similar to how both the Men in Black, MIB, and the Crypto-Terrestrials act, and particularly so when they are forced to go out in the day rather than at night. Maybe these strange-looking creatures are aliens, but they might be creatures that are somewhat like us and who live deep underground. Mac Tony's Crypto-Terrestrials. With that said, let's have a look deeper into all of this. Now, going back further in time, we have the account of Cartot in 1974 or 75, south of St. Louis, Missouri. She crossed paths with, quote, a very pale entity wearing a thin black coat, like a raincoat, with collar turned up to cover her neck, a heavy long-haired wig, and very large black glasses. And this did not entirely hide her strange face, a very pointed chin, scant lip and nose. She did not speak, end quote. And further back into the 1970s, there's a story that John Keel highlighted in his classic book, The Mothman Prophecies. It's a story I wrote about earlier this year here at Mysterious Universe, so for our purposes, I'll keep the summary brief. The odd affair surfaced in late 1971 and was focused on a woman named Shirley Cromartie. She was a mother of three who held a security clearance in the Florida White House and who found herself plunged into a profoundly strange situation. In a Florida parking lot, Cromartie was placed into a hypnotic stance by a mysterious wig-wearing woman. Keel suggested in his book that the hypnotic ability of Cromartie's mind-altering woman amounted to, quote, not some small demonstration for the benefit of President Nixon, end quote. Now let's have a look at the matter of the way in which all of these creatures try to make them look like us. The fact is that some alleged extraterrestrials or crypto-terrestrials do seem to be trying to move among us and without being noticed for what they really are. In fact, it may have been going on for not just years but decades. We'll begin with Men in Black, not the Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones type, rather the real Men in Black, the pale, scrawny, weird-looking Men in Black who surfaced in the early 1950s and who have never gone away. There is strong evidence to show that the Men in Black realize there are certain differences between us and them. As a result of this, they do their best to make them look like us. Those who have unfortunately crossed paths with the Men in Black, MIB, state that their black-suited visitors wore makeup and lipstick. In some cases, they even had what were clearly painted as eyebrows, as bizarre as it all sounds. On occasion, the MIB will wear large wraparound sunglasses. This is clearly done for camouflage. In some cases, the MIB are described as having large abnormal eyes that they hide behind those glasses. Often, though, they don't do a good job of hiding those bulging eyes, which is why we sometimes get to see those creepy eyes. So think about all of the above. These humanoids come out at night. They wear dark glasses. They make their skin look more human when it comes to color. They surface mostly at night. Add all of that together and you could make a solid case that all of this is done because these creatures are not used to living on the surface of our planet. They don't like the sun. They can't stand the heat. So they wait largely until the sun has gone down. Put all of those things together and you could say that Mac Tonnies was right when he said there are creatures working in our world, but in a very secretive way. Let's look at the black-eyed children. Imagine. It's dusk and you've just began to settle in for the evening. Your solitude is interrupted when there's a knock at the door. It's a long, continuous rapping, almost maddening in its insistence. And answering the door, you find a young child of about 10 years old. He stands quietly in a hooded top and jeans, staring at his shoes. And what you see of his face is very pale. And for some reason, you can't put your finger on it. He makes you nervous. In a cold, monotone voice, he requests that you, quote, invite him in, end quote. You look around, wondering where his parents are. You ask if he's lost or needs help, to which he responds, just let me in, this won't take long. Very mysterious. You start to back away, but for some reason you're conflicted. You feel stuck between running and simply opening the door and asking him to step inside. It is, after all, only a child, isn't it? That's when he looks up and makes eye contact with you, revealing large, solid black eyes that are unlike anything humanly possible. Your unease gives way to outright fear. Your flight response kicks in and you dash inside, slamming the door and bolting it as quickly as possible. You're shaking from fear and you say a silent prayer that the boy will just go away. You've just encountered a black-eyed kid, now commonly known as BEK. What exactly are these strange beings? Since the black-eyed children are pale and usually surface at night, you could say they're crypto-terrestrials who have carefully taken trips above the surface of our planet, something they rarely do. This all very much reminds me of Mac Tony's Crypto-Terrestrials. In his theory, Tony suggests that ancient humans lurk among us. Yes, he says ancient humans lurk among us and do so in ways that will ensure we don't get to see the subtle difference between them and us. Tony said, I envision the Crypto-Terrestrials engaged in a process of subterfuge, bending our belief systems to their own ends, and I suggest that this has been occurring in one form or another for an extraordinarily long time. I think there's a good deal of folklore and mythological evidence pointing in this direction, and I find it most interesting that so many descriptions of ostensible aliens, quote-unquote, seem to reflect staged events designed to misdirect witnesses and muddle their perceptions. Tony suggests that the Crypto-Terrestrials, like our aliens, may employ the likes of wigs, makeup, sunglasses, and hats in an effort to try and deflect attention away from their slight differences. A creepy thought, to be sure. The men in black are extremely pale and prefer to come out at night. So do the women in black. The black-eyed children do too. Now we have a scenario that sounds surprisingly wild, but plausible too. So now let's have a look at a few cases that tie in with what we've seen. Gloria is an elderly woman who lived in Decatur, Texas, and who I met with on the afternoon of the 22nd. I decided to make the approximately 110-mile round trip after hearing a bit of her story down the phone the previous evening. I set off early, wondering, as I always do, what exactly I might be in for. It was a typical November day in Texas when I hit the road. It could have been a less than extraordinary experience, as is sometimes the case, but not this time. On this occasion, the trip was well worth it. I arrived at an old house, probably dating from the 1940s, and which was well kept, and that had a welcoming porch on which were a couple of chairs. I knocked the door, and in just a few seconds it opened. In front of me was Gloria, a white-haired lady who smiled broadly. At least her experience was not affecting her character, I thought. She invited me in, and I sat down as a couple of caged canaries bid me welcome. At least I think that's what they did. On July 19th, 2012, Gloria told me, as we drank coffee and ate homemade lemon cake in her living room, she briefly saw what can only be accurately described as a flying saucer, which hovered over her home as she sat in her backyard, reading a book, and while her two dogs were company. In fact, it was the barking of both dogs, which stared intensely and rigidly at the sky, that alerted Gloria to the presence of the weird craft. It didn't stay around for long, however. It was a case of here 1 second and gone the next, but that was not all. The next afternoon, that of the 20th, there was a knock at the door. It was a pale-faced, thin woman of about 30, wearing a long black wig and dressed in a black jacket, a white blouse, and a flowing black skirt. And then there were the huge sunglasses, and the WIB smelled of dirt, something I have heard before. Gloria felt deeply uncomfortable as upon opening the door, the woman in black proceeded to warn her not to talk about the UFO she had encountered the previous day due to the claim that, quote, the government is concerned, end quote. Concerned about what was never explained to Gloria. In 1987, the Maxwell family spent a week vacationing in and around San Francisco, staying with friends in Menlo Park, and on their way back home, they traveled along California's famous Highway 101, which provides a panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean, and for mile upon mile, they chose to drive through the night when the highway would be at its least busy, thinking that it would be to their benefit to do so. How completely and utterly wrong they were, as fate would destined to have it. After a couple of hours of driving, the family of four spotted a strange light in the sky. It was described as a bright green ball of light, about the size of a beach ball, one which paced their car and stayed with them for a couple of miles at a height of around 60 feet. There was nothing frightening about the encounter. Rather, they were all amazed and excited. It wasn't long, however, before things got very disturbing. The day after the Maxwell family got home was a Sunday, meaning that they had an extra day before returning to work and school. It was while one of the teenage children was sat on the porch and playing music on an old Walkman that she caught sight of a man on the other side of the road. He was dressed completely in black, aside from a white shirt. He even wore black gloves on what was a bright, summery day. The girl was particularly disturbed by the fact that the man sported a weird grin and was staring right at her. So unsettled was she that she went back into the house and told her father of what had happened, what just happened. He quickly went to the door, but no surprise, the MIB was gone. When Mr. Maxwell told the story to me down the phone on January 3rd, the anxiety in his voice was as clear as it was eerie to hear. I've seen and heard that kind of anxiety so many times. Too many times, I would suggest, and regardless of the particular location, almost always in relation to the men in black. With all the above said, maybe we should turn our attention away from the idea that the BEC, the MMIB, and the Women IB are aliens, but instead that they are Tony's Crypto-Terrestrials who can only stand the heat of our sun and the daylight for a few hours or a day, and that's it. It's back to their underworld. The quickly, yes, it's just a theory, but I think it's one we should ponder on. And this is on Mysterious Universe by Nick Redfern. Let's remember that this is also the theory given by some tourist guides, archaeologists, historian tourist guides in South America, in the areas of Nazca, Pumapunco, and Tiwanaku, stating that there are ancient humans still living in underground cities that cannot stand the heat of the sun, and they can only come out moments before sunrise or after sunset, because of the fact that they used to live before the Great Flood and the change of the earth and the atmosphere. Let's remember we never even had rainbows before the Great Flood, according to the Old Testament. So something geological and astronomical did change concerning our earth, our atmosphere, and our geography, our geology. And these humans found refuge in underground cities. And he did say, this particular tourist guide archaeologist of South America says, yes, they are dangerous to humans. So you have to keep away from these ancient sites, because they tend to come out around these areas, and keep away from them because you could. They're malevolent. He said, they're not beneficial to us. So please leave your comments about this. Thank you for your support. I'll leave a link below for you. Thank you. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box